we'll start. Can I start now?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay. There. All right, everybody knows who I am, so I don't have to do introductions. I'm John. Thank you all. This started actually kind of an odd way. We started this whole renovation project really 10 years ago. That was the first thing. The second thing is, earlier this year, the main Beacon boy, Dick Heron, decided to step down from his responsibilities with the Beacon. And I thought, you know, that means it's just Ted and me to do this work, and that's not enough. Sooner or later, we're gonna be hung up. So I went to three friends, two of whom are here, to help me with this, and I thought, well, I need to bring them up to speed. Brian and Scott sitting in the back of the room, thinking they won't get called on. And then I thought, well, gee, since it has been 10 years, maybe some of, say, Mount Diablo's staff would be interested in this too. So rather than a meeting over beer at my house, we're here. There's a third man who may be late. Seth, he's the guy that was calling me when we were talking. So we've got Brian Kelly, Scott Miner, and David Carradine, who are now going to be helping with the Beacon. The first thing that's coming out of that is getting them up to speed, and the second thing is that means that for the first time in 10 years, I will be able to attend the event at CSUEB on Thursday. Haven't been to that. So when we did the renovation, somehow I sort of became the media person. I don't really know how that happened, but I ended up talking to a lot of people, and I did a lot of Beacon talks. I certainly didn't try to keep track, but I bet I give 50 of them to service groups and so on and so on and so on. Vietnam veterans of the Diablo Valley was the biggest one that I did. So, third one, David Carradine. Have a seat. Okay, so the Eye of Diablo, yeah, it's been up there since 1928. That's pretty common knowledge. So why is it there, and so on? It really started out with no military background whatsoever. You know, here we are celebrating Pearl Harbor Day and all that. I mean, if you can celebrate a calamity like that. It didn't. The whole Beacon thing did not start out with any military thing. It was all about commerce. We did not have radar at the time. In the 1920s, aviation was a new thing. Experimenting very much so with the way computers started out, you know, people trying things and so forth. And so in the 1920s, they wanted to be able to ship things, mainly mail, at night. So during World War I and into the 1920s, they would fly airmail during the daytime and then put it on a train to take it to the next place overnight, and then in the morning put it on another plane. It was all very quaint. So they started a series of lights, beacons as you see, so that a pilot could fly from beacon to beacon to beacon, 15 miles or so he could see the next one. Again, no radar, so you have to kind of keep that in mind. So this is stylized, a US postage stamp, airplane flying by. This is what it was like. So you can imagine these guys, you know, an old biplane, right after World War I, and US mail, that's how they did it. So the Department of Commerce and others put these lights on routes all over the country. This is but one. And you see how many people have driven Interstate 80 across the country. That look familiar? Goes right through the Midwest. We're back to New York. This is one route. There was also a southern route, went through Arizona and New Mexico and so on. And there were north-south routes too, that went up and down, first the Central Valley of California. This is one, anybody recognize that?
Shasta.
So this was this summer, I happened to be driving by. It's still there. This is a historic gas station now, although it's vacant. And you can see the tower. Today there's no light up there. They've taken down the Richfield sign, as in Richfield Oil. They sponsored this one. And there's an osprey nest up at the top for us conservationists. Isn't that cool? So they're not going to be taking this one down anytime soon. And this is Highway 99, bypassed by I-5, so it's right there. So what do these things look like? They had a variety of different sizes and styles of lights. They started out, some of them in very rural areas, as nothing more than an acetylene flame, if you can imagine. But then they started to build these towers. This is a really telling diagram. You see the tower, a variety of different heights. Windsock, this is the generator house, because they'd be out in the sticks, so they had these 4-cylinder generators to light the light. And the base, this pad, the concrete pad on which the tower is erected, you see the arrow? The arrow points to the next beacon. So you can imagine this pilot flying along, looking out of his airplane, oh yeah, I'll go this way. That's how they did it. Does anybody recognize this? This is a really, you do? This is a really odd one. 2 arrows. What's going on here? You can recognize the pad. This is just Google Earth. Anybody know where this is? Anybody recognize the mountain in the background? How about the buildings? This is right at 680 and 24. Not a mile from here. And the 2 arrows point to the north, because there is a light on the new Carquinez Bridge, which was built in 1927, and on up the Central Valley, roughly following 99, to Mount Shasta City and so on. So there are other paths that you can see. It's a hobby for airplane pilots, hobby pilots, to look for these things. So you can see them from the air. The other arrow pointed to Sacramento. Lackawanna's Ridge open space. So you can walk there. Well, that's how I got the picture. So what about our beacon? So standard Diablo, this is our 70-foot tower, and then the filament of the beacon is another 5 feet high, so you'll often see that this is a 75-foot tower, and the filament of the bulb is in fact about 75 feet. Financed by Standard Oil of California. They financed 5 of these, particularly large ones, 10 million candle power, and the locations were Seattle, Portland, Mount Diablo, Los Angeles on Standard Oil property, and on a hill in San Diego, so 5 beacons. And a big deal, inaugurated by Colonel Charles Lindbergh, April 15th, 1928. Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover, soon to be president, it's 1928, soon to be president, came out to San Francisco to turn this thing on. It's a big deal. Many of you have heard it was, well, first it was, this is Standard Oil's magazine. A big company will put out their own mag. Very stylized view. I put that, what kind of plane is this, simply because every so often there'll be aviation buffs. Anybody know what it is? Standard Oil owned a Ford Tri-Motor. And don't forget, it's 1928, so it's a company plane at the time. This is the Chronicle. Big deal, and notice it says here, Lindy to set Standard Oil lamps alight. Now, Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, of course, everybody knows that one, we all learned it in history class, in May of 1927. So this is 11 months later. Lindbergh was an international hero at the time. And he went on, you've heard the term barnstorming, he was flying all over the country promoting aviation, including a new airline, Trans-America Air, that became TWA. He was a major figure in the promotion of aviation at the time. So he lit this one and the one in Merced Hills. I can't overemphasize the significance of this whole program at this point. Today it seems so quaint. Back then, it was significant. So how was this used? These are compass points. Again, this is so Boy Scoutish to me, but there you go. You fly toward the standard Diablo Beacon, and you see your compass bearings. Notice number 2 there is Crissy Field. Everybody's been to Crissy Field in the city. It hasn't been an airport for a really long time, but 1928 it was. And so it remained. The tower at the summit was built on private property that was owned by
Walter Frick.
There you go. Walter Frick owned most of Mount Diablo at the time. So not only did Standard Oil have to get permission from him, but there's an even more local angle. Save Mount Diablo co-founder also had to get permission from Walter Frick to tramp around doing her botanical studies back in the 30s. Frick owned much of the summit. Seth has done a ton of biographical work on Walter Frick. If you like this stuff, it's worth a read. He was just a businessman that put together a bankruptcy that happened shortly after World War I. And then he started selling parcels to the newly formed Mount Diablo State Park. The first one was not the summit, but it followed shortly thereafter. So the summit became a state park, and then of course it was the Depression. And so the CCC came in, Civilian Conservation Corps, one of FDR's alphabet soup make work projects. And one of the things that's worth a mention is the Diablo stove. This was developed on Mount Diablo by the CCC, and the design was so successful that it was used all over the country. And sure enough, I was at Calaveras State Park just this last summer, walking around a campground, there was a Diablo stove. Was that fun? So they continued to work throughout the 30s. Much of the older infrastructure that you see on the state park, and also in Tilden Park, by the way, was done by the CCC. The stonework, first the Diablo stoves, of course, and the many picnic tables, stone walls, culverts, and then finally, in 1939, they started construction on the Summit building. Obviously a significant achievement for these workers that are just looking for something to do. So this is probably my favorite historic photo of the summit. So the platform is at the summit itself. There used to be a flagpole, as you can see, a big pile of rock, locally quarried stone for the building, and then you gotta love the cars. And my favorite part is right here. It's the shadow of the tower. The tower is the west side of the parking lot, so this is in the afternoon. And I just read, thanks to Leanne here. Oh, I should mention, Leanne Davis is the executive director of the Contra Costa Historical Society. So we had a nice chat last week about this, that the steel from the tower was disassembled in 1939, and as we understand it, the steel was used for the skeleton for the summit building. So this is just as it was getting started. My second favorite picture of the OSHA-approved scaffold. You gotta love this. The crane is this telephone pole, so you can see the beacon at the summit, at the top of the tower, and the railing just being lifted into place. You gotta love it. So they would have used the scaffold, of course, to put the windows in. So the beacon was turned back on in April of 1941. Everybody's happy about that. The beacon is shining again. And then what happened? December 7th, 1941. So just a few months later, Pearl Harbor happened. Everybody has seen this photo. It's in every history book. It's the Arizona. 1,177 men went down on that ship. There were 1,500 in the ship total, so almost all of the crew lost their lives with that. It was an amazing, if you look at it from the Japanese side, it was an amazing military success. If you look at it from our side, what a disaster, obviously. And the country, of course, was shocked. That's when Roosevelt talked about the day that she'll live in infamy, state of war on Japan, because of that day. And it's kind of hard to read. This is the log. So we have this documentation. Trip to Beacon, trip to Beacon, trip to Beacon. December 8th. Trip to shut off Beacon as to blackout. The West Coast blackout was significant. You can talk to your parents or your grandparents about it. Everybody turned their lights off, put down their shades, because of course, again, in the absence of radar, what would the enemy, the Japanese, have but lights? So they turned off the beacon. It makes sense, So they turned off the beacon, and by the end of World War II, we had radar. So this whole system of lights, beacons all over the country, those routes and so forth, was obsolete. The other beacons that we are aware of the five, the other four, Seattle and so on, they were all taken down and they are lost. Probably went to scrap during the war, but they are lost. We learned of one that was on an island on the Willamette River, the Portland one obviously, in 1937, so taken down, really early, and it's lost. So, to our knowledge, our beacon is the only one existent today. So, in World War II, we didn't need it anymore. Probably it stayed there simply because it was a state park, and nobody did anything about it. It wasn't commercial. The Los Angeles beacon was on Standard Oil property, so you can bet they would have torn it down and it's gone. So until 1964, it's well known, the Pearl Harbor Survivors Associations, mostly Alameda County, which was at the time much bigger than Contra Costa County, thought they should light the beacon every December 7th. So they called Admiral Nimitz, who had retired to Berkeley. He lived on Santa Barbara Road in Berkeley. Why do I know that? Trivia point. I delivered the Berkeley Gazette to Admiral Nimitz when I was a boy. And I remember knocking on his door, and this old man came and he said, "Come in here, Sonny." And I did. I walked into Admiral Nimitz's house, and there's military memorabilia all over the place. But it looked like all the Army Navy surplus stores that I'd been to with my dad, so I'm sure he was disappointed that I was unimpressed, rather than walking around like a kid with his jaw on the floor. But anyway, he came out. This is one, I mentioned this to Leanne. Whenever I give one of these talks, I mention this 1964 date. We have almost no information about that day. I'm told there was a band that played and the Pearl Harbor survivors. We don't know who or how many people were here. The information is scant to say the least. So if you know anything about, I even contacted the Admiral Nimitz Museum. Nothing. So there's my request. So that went on. The Pearl Harbor survivors sponsored this lighting every year until about 15, 16 years ago, when the state park got wind that the Pearl Harbor survivors didn't have appropriate insurance to hold an event up at the summit. So in their wisdom, the state just thought they would cancel the whole thing. And you can imagine that made a lot of people very unhappy. And Save Mount Diablo stepped in. Save Mount Diablo did have the insurance to hold such an event. Our ED at the time, Ron Brown, was a veteran himself, Navy, and it was consistent with our mission. So he thought, what if we start doing that? So we just sort of took it over. And so it went like this. This is in the Summit building. You can see our veterans, of course, and over on the left-hand side is a little bit of Ron's head. The fellow in the hat there is Dave Sargent, one of our former board members, and of course, our Pearl Harbor veterans. So we did that for 4 or 5 years, and there's a missing slide. Well, okay, there's a missing slide.
There it is.
In 2009, we had a snowstorm. And you all know about it because
It's not here.
Scott Hines' photograph of the snowy North Peak was that day. And the road was closed. So we held the ceremony at the base of North Gate Road. Dick Heron and retired Ranger Bert Bogardus walked to the summit to turn on the beacon in the snow. And the slide that I'm missing is of Bert standing on that, or poking his head at the snowy catwalk. They spent 45 minutes pushing the beacon because it wouldn't rotate. And finally it got warmed up enough. They locked it up and walked back down the hill. At that point, Ron, our ED, said, what do you think about restoring the beacon? And he called Dick in to the office, our previous office, and asked Dick about it, and we'll get to Dick in a minute, but I happened to be walking into the office as Dick was walking in, and we know each other well. I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, Ron was just asking me about restoring the beacon, what do you think? And I said, oh, I want to be part of that project right away. And so the two of us started to work on it. We had a, I guess I can't go backwards on this. We had the first headaches then when the state declared that it would be a public works project and would have to go out to bid. And you know how the costs on that would be. And we were gonna do it for free. And the state did not have an avenue to allow that to happen. So the park superintendent, who was a friend, looked at Dick and me and said, you guys aren't competent to be doing this kind of work. That did not make us happy. But our assembly member, Joan Buchanan, thought that was crazy and went to bat for us big time. She drafted legislation to allow the restoration of the Eye of Diablo by the nonprofit Save Mount Diablo. And it sailed through the Assembly, sailed through the Senate, Governor Jerry Brown signed it, and then all of a sudden the state park personnel became our friends. And a picture of the 4 people, I can't go backwards, the picture of the 4 people were Tony Jackson, the head of the Department of Parks and Rec, Joan Buchanan, Ron Brown, the superintendent who told us we weren't competent, who's a good guy, you know, and Anita Rodriguez, the district superintendent at the time. We're all there December of 2012, and that's when the work began. So we're working with the state historians. Dick and I are up and down, you know, to the Beacon, talking to different people, trying to figure out the logistics of getting this done. You can see the Beacon there looking pretty forlorn at that point. This is looking up at it, kind of disorienting to see. And we started studying, trying to figure out how we were going to go about this and so on. So this is just one of the little things. The light bulb on the left is the old light bulb, 32 volts. 32 volts, no idea. In the 80s, and in fact it was Bert Bogardus that I mentioned, he converted it to 120 volts, and that's the bulb on the right. You can see the different filaments. They used those in movie projectors. And we got wind that they were not going to be manufacturing that kind of bulb anymore, so we started looking for something different, which you'll see. This is the lamp changer. This is high-tech stuff at the time. There's a bulb socket and the spare, and this strip at the top is a bimetal strip. So if a bulb went out, the strip would cool down, trip a mercury switch. There's a vial of mercury in here, and the new bulb would rock into place and light. High tech. And a telephone call would go to the switchboard in Diablo to tell the electrician to go up and change the bulb. Well, of course, we took that down. This is now in storage in Sonoma. I'd like to get it back and put it up in the visitor center, which I'm sure we could do. But then finally the work could begin. We had the agreement from the state. We had worked with the historians. They approved what we wanted to do. In the studies, of course, the paint was lead-based paint. You know, we had it analyzed and stuff. We had the colors analyzed. And I wrote, thanks to Redwood Painting, and this is the first of the community that came out. Not sure where to insert this, but Dick and I first thought this would be a small project. In fact, we went up there and thought, well, geez, Dick, I have a pickup truck. We could probably just put it in my garage, you know. Big problem is going to be finding a crane. That's all. But then we were on the front page of the Contra Costa Times, the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle. The radio and TV picked it up, and the project was now this big. And in a funny bunch of connection, I found Redwood Painting. Now this is a union paint shop. You're not going to hire them to paint your kitchen. They do oil refineries and PG&E substations and so forth. And like so many others, this is only one example, they said, gee, that sounds like a cool project. We'll buy the paint, take care of the painting, we'll even throw away your hazmat. And by the way, I live in Clayton. And then they assigned me a salesman, you know, one of their, not salesmen, reps that goes out and estimator type guy. I'm talking to him one day and he said, by the way, my father was at Pearl. There's another connection, just like this. So Redwood Painting became our friends big time. These guys came up in their hazmat suits. You can't see it, but there's a vacuum cleaner picking up all of the dust that they're making into one of those HEPA vacuum cleaners to be thrown away as hazmat, suits and everything. This is an air chisel to be digging out all of the sealant from the leaky platform. It was a miserable bunch of work. And finally, in June of 2013, another connection. Of course, we went to Standard Oil, well, Chevron, you know, started out as Standard Oil, of course. Went to Chevron, whose world headquarters is right in San Ramon. They have a history department. Dick met with them, and and they were very helpful, and, you know, Dick found some documentation that Chevron had. Great, we need a crane, can you help us out? And they, oh, sure, oh gosh, we'd be happy to do whatever we can. And it turned out their legal department is a black hole. And Ron was going crazy, looking for an agreement that this is actually gonna happen. Shell had come to us also, again, out of the blue. Shell Oil Martinez. They came and said, when you reach a stumbling block, not if, they said, when you reach a stumbling block with Chevron, give us a call. And Ron had finally had it with Chevron, called Shell, and in 4 hours we had an agreement. They showed up with this crane, and the riggers, you know, the crane operators, the riggers and so forth, and they lifted the beacon down. So this is Mount Diablo's truck at the time. The big trailer that we use in stewardship projects, it was a beacon project that bought that trailer for us. The crane operators. One of our veterans had been a crane operator for a while, Joe. And he went over to personally thank each of these guys, Kathy Ivers. And one of them said, where are my sunglasses when I need them? It was touching, big time. That they did not know that they were becoming part of this project. So we had the Pearl Harbor veterans came up, the media came up big time. Not to pump myself up, this is Dave Padilla from KCBS. Of all the interviews I did, he asked by far the best questions. I don't remember what they were, but they were just really good questions, a real pro. I was really impressed with this guy. I'd done a lot of interviews. Found another one of our former media person, Burl Anderson, talking with Steve Lesher. I wanted to put that in and couldn't find it. We were doing the fundraising for this, and we came up with a number kind of out of the blue that was going to cost us $100,000 to get this done, because we thought we were going to have to buy the crane and so on. And finally, the Lesher Foundation from the Contra Costa Times put up a $50,000 matching grant, and with the community support, we had the funds all ready to go in days or weeks. It happened that fast. And you know, the media coverage was just huge. Shout out to Dick. We were constantly called the Beacon Boys with a Z. And make no mistake, this is Beacon Boy number 1. I mean, I did a lot of work. Beacon Boy number 3 did a lot of work. You'll meet him in a second. But far and away, all credit to Dick. He is the one who really coordinated the project, that did the heavy lifting, right there. PhD in engineering, fabrication skills that won't quit. Amazing guy. So down the hill we went. We wrapped it up, tied it down to the trailer, and to what we jokingly called an undisclosed location in Concord. And we did that because it was business. It was a secure warehouse. It was a business. You'll see the owner here in a little bit. But it was secure, it was locked, and they had a forklift. I don't know how we would have done this without the forklift. The thing weighs about 1,500 pounds, so it's not like you can just get 3 or 4 guys and pick it up and move it around. Part of the community thing, you can see this platform here, the black part. Dick designed that, and Dick knows how to weld, I know how to weld, and we said, well, we can put this together. And I said, no. The head of the welding instructor at Las Positas College said, hey, if you need any welding, let me know, I'd be happy to help. And I said to Dick, I said, have those guys put this thing together instead of us. So I took the steel over there, and that's Scott right here, who took care of that, and lots of other welding, as it turns out, on this project. If there's a Beacon Boy number 4, it'd be Scott. So you can see it's pretty forlorn the way it looks, and so now that it's down in the warehouse, we could really start studying it. On the left is John Stewart, Beacon Boy number 3, and if there's a Beacon Boy number 5, it'd be Alan Frank. So John is an engineer, designed circuit panels for PG&E, and Alan Frank has a PhD in optical physics, of all things. I mean, we had some heavy hitters on this. I met Alan through another Mount Diablo volunteer, and heard about it. I called him up, and he said, "Well, come over." I brought him a piece of glass from the front cover, which you'll see, and he's holding it up to the sun, and he's doing trigonometry in his head, trying to decide what kind of glass it might be. I said, "He's our man." So they started studying. You can see the beam of the beacon shining on the wall there. And this is what it looks like. That's Alan. You could not take this photo, except that the voltage running through the bulb right now is like 15 watts. So it's turned way down. I mean, you can't look at this. You can warm your hands from this thing. And they're studying, the brightness and so forth. I found a photo of it, but it wasn't worth putting up. We cleaned the reflector, cleaned the front cover, and the brightness went up 10%. John did this, a new lamp stand, because we realized that old projector bulb would no longer be manufactured at some point. So we made the adjustments to change to a halogen lamp and a new socket. LEDs, somebody should ask, why don't you use LEDs? And the LEDs just flat out were not going to work. Because you need a point source of light to be working with that big reflector. So we got a new light bulb. It's a halogen bulb. This is the bulb, this is its reflection in the light. Another thing, the bearing was kind of fun. We finally lifted the light off its stand, exposing the bearing. And Dick looked at me and said, what are we going to do with that? And I said, well, Dick, I have a bearing puller at home, but it's not that big. And so we called Shell. And Shell came out, this is one of their machinists, and he said, oh, we can get that off. And they came out with a bearing puller, and in about 30 seconds, the bearing was in my hands. All that crud, who's been up to the summit to see this, besides you guys have, of course. This is all dead earwigs. The bearing was bad. There was a reason why it wouldn't rotate so well. The foreman of the machine shop at Shell was there, and he said, let me take that back to the shop. And Dick and I looked at each other and said, this is the bearing. This is the only one. Okay. And he called back in about an hour and said, hey, I got 2 of them. You want sealed or non-sealed? On the shelf at Shell, they had a bearing. So we got a sealed bearing to keep the earwigs out. And you can see the size of this thing. So some of the other stuff, you can get an idea of the weight, as Dick and Bert Pagardis over here. Dick is not, or Bert is not, there's a 4th man there holding this thing up. You can see the sag, that's a 2x6. This thing was heavy. That's just the base. The front cover was an interesting thing. It's slats of glass. Show and tell. There. Slats of glass. They were 1/4 inch. This is 5/16. We didn't know what kind of glass it was. I first thought it was Pyrex, which was invented in 1915. This is ordinary glass, just regular old window glass, just thicker. And we cut these slats to size. stick is there, numbering them so we could disassemble it. One of our good helpers in the shop was Neil Dawson right over here, working with the front cover. Of course, the gasket is pure asbestos. You know, you can bet on that. So we had to have the asbestos guys out, you know, and keep it wet, and another vacuum cleaner to be sampling the whole time. And then we had to cut new glass. Anybody know what a water jet cutter is besides Scott? You? Coast Guard? I mean, Coast Guard. Maritime Academy?
Yeah.
If I took a hose and pointed it at you, it just feel cold, right? No big deal. And if I put a nozzle on it, it might not be comfortable. Suppose I ran the water pressure up to 30,000 pounds and put sand in it, and now make the jet 3 millimeters, maybe 4. They go right through you. And that's what this is doing. This is a CNC water jet cutter. And you can see the little pieces of glass? And this is a scrap. I haven't broken this yet. It's been sitting on a windowsill at home for 10 years. We got a perfect circle out of the deal. It looked like that. We had all new glass. Isn't that cool? Put it together, and we had a new front cover. Paint. We didn't know what color it should be. We had analyzed the paint. I think there were 7 layers of paint, and we couldn't figure out what was original. There was State Park brown. There was some kind of bluish color. There was International Orange, the same color as the Golden Gate Bridge. And there was something, anyway. We had this black and white photo. What color is that, gang? And maybe that's primer, because it was brand new at the time. We flat out didn't know. And we were feeling under pressure about what to do here. And out of the blue, the state historian called me up and said, "Go to your email right now." I went, okay, wait. She said, "You're not going to believe this." She found a color photo, very obviously taken by the same photographer at the same time. These are the same cars in that truck in a parking lot. Color film. This is not enhanced stuff. It was silver. So back down to the painters. This is the base of the beacon, and I forget now. Quicksilver metallic is like a Chevrolet, and brilliant silver is a Subaru, something like that. Just go out to the parking lot and pick out whatever you like, you know, some kind of silver. And so we went to work. Again, our union painters, it's painted with a brush, not spray painted, 2-part paint, not lead based, obviously, and we had it painted. There's a little bit of bright work, brass on it. It's a little bit more visible here. This is the angle that the beacon would be at. Since it was up on a mountain, it pointed downwards by, I think it was 2.5 degrees or something like that, to more or less point toward the Golden Gate. So it'd be, instead of being level, or, you know, you think of a beacon shining upwards, it actually tilted down just a little bit. And as part of our studies with this, we knew it would be really hard to change this angle because everything was, you know, rusted and frozen shut and so on. So we moved the filament. The new bulb is a shade brighter than the old bulb, but by moving the filament back toward the reflector a little bit, we made that beam a little wider. And with the same amount of brightness, or we ended up with the same amount of brightness, only wider. And And then we moved it up a little bit so that the beam would face downwards a bit more toward Walnut Creek and Concord, because we didn't need to be shining toward the Golden Gate. And we did that by moving the bulb just a touch. Sperry made this. It was made in Delaware. A little bit of brass polishing. And finally, we had it done. I was going to point out, this is Rex Bothell, a man that had the warehouse. His business was in there. He had been at the summit in 1964 when Nimitz came out, so he had a personal connection to this beacon too. Again, found us through the newspaper. Beacon Boy number 6. He was integral to this thing. And finally, in October 2013, back up the mountain. Some of our Pearl Harbor survivors are there. There's only one of those 3 gentlemen left, but you can see the beacon looks pretty different at this point. I always like this photo. No, this is not upside down. They're reflected in the beacon. And up it went. A little scary to look at this, you know. That's what they do, the crane operators. It looks like it's going to crash right into the tower. But everything went fine. We had cheated by arranging an extension cord on the beacon. Runs 120 volts. So we had put a socket up there so we could plug it in as soon as it was mounted. And of course, everybody cheered to see the beacon shining again. That was fun. The bird cage, we always called it, that supports the red, I always call it the red blinky light, the aircraft obstruction light, the one that's on blinking every night. That's there. That went up with a crane. Anybody want his job? This is one of the riggers from Shell. He just acted like this was nothing. You gotta see some of the stuff I do at work every day. And he's standing up on the railing, disconnecting everything. So now the beacon is up. Everybody's happy, and we turn it on first Pearl Harbor Day, now Memorial Day and Veterans Day as well. During the pandemic, I'm sure you're aware, we turned it on every week for a year. Dick and I took turns turning it on, and somebody else, you know, turned it off every Monday morning. And I thought, well, maybe everybody would want to see what the control panel looks like. And that's the picture that I found. So that's the control panel. It's completely overbuilt. You guys, this is a Variac resistor, so we can turn the voltage down if we want to. There's no need, but we could. Nice voltmeter. It works a champ. Back to the setting. This is Chuck Kohler, doubtless our most emotional and articulate of the Pearl Harbor survivors. He will be turning 100, I believe, next month. And he's one that provided the American flag to be up there. And at the end, he was asking the riggers, any of you guys a veteran? This one guy said, yeah, I am. And so Chuck dutifully folded the flag, salute the flag, and that's the kind of emotion we got. And there's the flag. Let's see if this works. Hey, it works.
Oh, that's cool.
Kind of fun working at it.
That's Cameron's image,
Yeah.
right?
Last May, we're getting ready to light the Beacon Memorial Day, and I saw a drone flying, and I knew that drones are illegal in the state park. Who's doing that? And I looked down, and there's our supervising ranger, Cameron, with the controls. So I went down and I said, hey, Cameron, to whom do I complain about this beacon flying, or this drone flying? And he said, that would be me. And I said, okay, I won't complain to Sacramento if you give me the photos. So he just sent the photos to my phone, and this is one of the videos that he made. Kind of neat looking down. CSUEB is right over here, so on Thursday you can see the beacon. And that's how it rotates. And I'm done. And look at that, it's 1 minute to 5. Final thing, Dick and I both agree about this. Of course, the most poignant part of doing this was meeting our Pearl Harbor survivors. Many of them did not talk about what they did. One of them said he was married for 45 years before he told his wife he was at Pearl. One of them said he spent most of the time picking bodies out of the water. The stories are amazing to listen to because it's like every war movie you've seen, only this is real. This is the real deal. It's been amazing meeting them. But this, and the second, Dick would say this too, the second most amazing part was how the community came out to say, this is a cool project, how can I help? The publicity and the good vibes that Save Mount Diablo got out of this were something that none of us even came close to imagining would happen. It's something that the organization should feel very proud of, that we're doing this, and I'm expecting, I know, we will continue to do this for the foreseeable future. So thanks to the group for carrying on this, what is now a significant tradition. None of us knew it was going to be like this. We just, you know, and then the community just showed up over and over and over again. Scott was one of them. Who just, you just saw the article in the paper? Yeah. Carl Nolte, the great writer for the Chronicle, who is now 90 himself, just turned 90. He wrote a front page article for us. People came out of the woodwork. Hey, my dad was a veteran, my father-in-law was a veteran, somebody, I have a complete machine shop. If there's anything you need, how can I help? Over and over again, that happened. People came out just to say, oh, even the Diablo woodworkers said, I'm sure that none of this is wood, but if you need anything out of wood, let us know. Our spare pieces of glass are in a nice little wooden box up at the summit. Remind me, I'll get you up there, Leanne.
Yes.
All of our spare glass is in this nice wooden box that Diablo woodworkers made. So there's even that. Neil, how did you find out?
I read it in the newspaper.
Read it in the newspaper.
And I just called. I wanted to be part of a program, and as an antique collector and someone that likes to restore history and so forth, it really got me excited. I thought I could contribute. So.
And you did. And you did. Yeah, really. Again, I cannot discount meeting the Pearl Harbor veterans, and I'm a total non-military guy. I'm a complete pacifist. At the same time, it was just amazing to meet with them, salt of the earth men and women. But the community coming out was just really, really heartwarming too. I'm done.
Thank you, John Gallagher.
There's just one image that I thought would be cool if you added in there at some point, John, which was one of the things that happened. There was a lot of publicity, and it started, I forget the first image of removing the beacon or what month that was, and then bringing it back, I think was October or something. But there were front page pictures of the Morgan fire in September 2013, which showed them battling it along the roads, and at the Summit building, they were trying to keep it from burning down the Summit building. They didn't know, the newspaper articles reported that the firefighters were trying to protect the historic Mount Diablo, Eye of Diablo beacon, which however was down in a warehouse in Concord. They were protecting the Summit building.
He is quite correct about this.
But that happened right at the same time, almost in the same time, to further complicate matters.
We put the beacon back up in October of 2013. The Morgan fire was September of 2013. I've got a whole,
Yeah.
I don't wanna go through it. But this is taken from my house.
Mhm.
Right when the fire started, my daughter was at home and, Dad, look at that!
But I've got an image, I don't know if you've seen it, you must have seen this one. I've got an image with flames around the Summit Museum.
I remember Jake and I were supposed to go up and do some welding right after that, and he said, oh, maybe we better hold off on that, that's probably not a popular activity up there right now.
The flames, one more. I do have the flames burning, but you can see this is the upper
Yeah,
parking lot.
similar to that,
Looking
yeah.
toward,
That's what
looking
he
toward
said.
the summit. The scaffold was there for an unrelated project, but we did take advantage of it. You can see the burned ground coming right up to the railing of the parking lot. And the scaffold is metal, but the surfaces on which they walk were all wood. They did not burn. They did have one windy day when several of the planks blew out off the scaffold. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, that's it.
I knew I had that. Yeah, that was scary. You know, but Seth is right. The spokesperson said something to the effect of, "Oh, we've been watching over the beacon like a hen looks out after her eggs," and the beacon was in Concord. And actually, you can see the antennae up there, but no, there's no
Could have
beacon.
become a much bigger restoration project.
Yes.
That's it. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for coming. Above all, you know, this originally started that I was gonna bring these three gents, David and Brian and Scott, up to speed on the beacon, and I thought, well, gee, there's a lot of staff that weren't here 10 years ago. It's hard to think it's been 10 years. So that was the point, so I'm glad you all made it. Ted wasn't even here yet.
Thank you, it was great, John.
It was a great Christmas.
Done.
Cool. Nice job.